When the 7-year-old girl at the roadside diner asked the waitress for extra crackers, the man watching her from the counter felt a cold knot tighten in his gut. It was a strange request, delivered in a voice too small and too timid for the noisy room. But it was what she did next, subtly, almost invisibly, hiding the cellophane-wrapped packages inside her worn-out coat while avoiding the sharp, angry glare of the woman beside her, that confirmed his darkest suspicions. For the biker the world knew as Styx, a man whose past in the dust-choked mountains of Afghanistan had trained him to see the fractures in a seemingly perfect picture, this small act of desperation set off a chain of events that would turn a quiet lunch into a desperate race against time, culminating in a rescue that would change more than one life forever. The diner was called the Silver Fork, though nothing inside it was silver and very few of the forks matched. It was a classic American way station, a brick and glass box dropped beside a 2-lane highway that cut through endless miles of Oregon pine forest. The air inside smelled of old coffee, sizzling bacon, and the faint, sweet scent of maple syrup that seemed to have soaked into the cracked red vinyl of the booths. It was a place for people going somewhere else, a temporary harbor for truckers, families in minivans, and the occasional lone rider like himself. Styx sat at the counter, a position he always preferred. It gave him a clear view of the entire room, the entrance, the exit, and the reflection of the parking lot in the big plate glass window. His Harley-Davidson, a blacked-out road glide that rumbled like distant thunder, was parked just outside, its chrome catching the pale afternoon sun. At 48, Styx was leaner than most of his brothers in the Iron Sentinels motorcycle club, a wiry frame of corded muscle and old scars earned in places he no longer spoke about. His road name, Styx, had been given to him for that very reason. He looked like a bundle of tightly wound sticks, unassuming until he realized they were hickory, hard enough to break bone. He wore the club's cut, a leather vest adorned with the snarling wolf's head patch of the Iron Sentinels. Below it, a rocker read the Sergeant-at-Arms, a title he carried with the same quiet gravity he'd carried his rank in the Army Rangers. He had traded one brotherhood for another, but the core principles remained the same: you looked out for your own, and you protected those who could not protect themselves. He was nursing a lukewarm coffee, letting the caffeine do its slow work, when they walked in. The woman came first, pulling the little girl along by the wrist. Her grip was too tight, her movements too jerky and impatient. She was a study in frayed nerves, with a hard face and eyes that darted around the diner as if searching for threats. The girl was a ghost in her wake, small and pale, with wide, watchful eyes that seemed to take in everything and nothing all at once. Her coat was a thin, faded pink thing, utterly inadequate for the crisp autumn air outside. Her shoes were scuffed, one lace untied. They looked wrong together. The pieces didn't fit. It wasn't a judgment, just an observation. Styx had spent years of his life observing, cataloging details that others missed. It was a skill honed by survival. He noticed the way the woman's cheap purse didn't match her worn-out clothes, suggesting it was new, or perhaps not hers. He saw the faint, yellowing bruise high on the little girl's cheekbone, partially hidden by her lank brown hair. He saw the way she never spoke, only nodded or shook her head in response to the woman's clipped, harsh questions. They took a booth by the window, the one furthest from the door. Another detail that pinged on his internal radar. People who were hiding or running either sat with their back to the wall to see everything, or they sat by the door for a quick escape. Sitting in the far corner felt like a cage. The woman ordered for both of them, a bowl of soup for the girl and just a coffee for herself. She drank it black, her hands trembling slightly as she lifted the mug. Styx turned his attention back to his own coffee, but his focus remained on the reflection in the window. He could see them perfectly. He was just a man on a stool, another traveler passing through. He was invisible. He used that invisibility as a shield, a tool that allowed him to watch without being watched. He saw the waitress, a kind-faced woman named Dolene according to her name tag, bring the soup. It was a simple vegetable soup, steam rising from the bowl. The little girl stared at it, her expression unreadable. Then came the moment that changed everything. The girl's voice was barely a whisper when she spoke to the waitress. "Could I please have some more crackers?" The woman beside her shot her a venomous look. "You have crackers. Eat your soup." The girl flinched, her small shoulders hunching as if expecting a blow. Darlene, the waitress, hesitated, her kind eyes flickering between the woman's anger and the girl's fear. She made a decision born of simple human decency. She smiled warmly at the child. "Of course, sweetie. We have plenty." She returned a moment later with a small basket piled high with saltine crackers in their neat little plastic wrappers. The woman grunted, turning to stare out the window in disgust. And that's when the girl began her strange, secret ritual. With painstaking slowness, her eyes fixed on the woman's rigid back, she began to move. She didn't eat the crackers. She didn't crumble them into her soup. She began to steal them. One by one, she slipped the packets from the basket. Her movements were fluid and practiced, the motions of someone who had done this before. She slid them off the table and into the lap of her thin coat. Then, when she had a small pile, she carefully, silently, worked them into an inner pocket. Her small face was a mask of concentration, a silent prayer in every movement that she would not be discovered. Styx felt the world slow down. The clatter of plates, the murmur of conversation, the hiss of the coffee machine, it all faded into a dull roar. His training, the instincts that had been drilled into him until they were more natural than breathing, took over. He wasn't just a biker in a diner anymore. He was an operator, a protector. And he was witnessing a signal. This was not a picky child hoarding snacks. He knew what he was seeing. This was survival. The crackers were emergency rations. They were for later. For when she was left alone again. For when the soup was the only meal she might get that day, or the next. It was the desperate, forward-thinking act of a child who had learned not to trust in the promise of her next meal. It was the act of a hostage. His blood, which had been peacefully warm from the coffee, turned to ice water in his veins. Every hypervigilant instinct he possessed screamed at him. The mismatched clothes, the bruise, the fear, the woman's agitation, and now this. The secret hoarding of crackers. It was a constellation of red flags, and they were all pointing to one terrible, unavoidable conclusion. The girl finished her work. She had secured maybe a dozen packets of crackers. A fortune, in her world. She finally looked up, her task complete, and her gaze swept the room. Her eyes, wide and brown and filled with a sorrow no child should ever know, met his in the reflection of the window. For a split second, there was a connection. A current of understanding passed between the hardened veteran and the terrified child. He saw her. He truly saw her. And in that moment, she knew it. Her eyes widened almost imperceptibly. She didn't smile. She didn't make a sound. She simply gave the tiniest, most minute shake of her head. It was a gesture so small that anyone else would have missed it, would have dismissed it as a twitch and nothing. But Styx saw it for what it was. It was a confirmation. It was a plea. No. I am not okay. The connection was broken as the woman turned back from the window. Are you done yet? We're leaving. She didn't wait for an answer. She threw a few crumpled dollar bills onto the table, enough to cover the soup and coffee but not a cent more. She grabbed the girl's arm again, hauling her out of the booth. Styx didn't move. He sat perfectly still on his stool, his mind a whirlwind of tactics and possibilities. He could confront them here, in the diner. But that could be messy. The woman might have a weapon. The girl could get hurt in the chaos. He could call the police, but what would he say? A feeling? A girl hoarding crackers? They would take a report, but by the time they acted, the woman and child would be long gone, swallowed by the endless highway. He had learned a hard lesson in the service: hesitation kills. Inaction is a choice, and it is almost always the wrong one. The risk of being wrong, of making a fool of himself by intervening in what could be a simple, if dysfunctional, family matter, was nothing compared to the risk of being right and doing nothing. He thought of all the times he had been too late. He would not let this be another one. He stood up, his movement slow and deliberate. He dropped a $20 bill on the counter to cover his coffee and Darlene's kindness. As he turned, the woman and the girl were already at the door. He needed more information. He needed a pretext. He needed a reason to get close. His eyes fell on the napkin by his plate. He followed them, keeping a casual distance. He walked past their table, his boots making a soft, rhythmic sound on the linoleum floor. Just as he drew level with them, as the woman fumbled with the handle of the glass door, he let the napkin slip from his fingers. It fluttered to the ground right at the little girl's feet. "Oops," he said, his voice a low rumble. He bent down, a big man folding himself into a smaller space. His head was now level with the girl's. The woman shot him an annoyed glare, impatient to leave. For a precious second, he was out of her direct line of sight. He looked directly into the girl's terrified eyes. "Are you okay?" he whispered, his voice barely audible over the jingle of the bell on the door. "Is that your mom?" The girl's face crumpled. A single tear traced a path through the grime on her cheek. Her lips trembled, and she formed a single, silent word. "No." Then, she whispered back, a sound as faint as a moth's wing. "She's not my mom." That was it. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. All doubt, all hesitation, evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. The woman had seen the exchange. She hadn't heard the words, but she saw the look on the girl's face. She saw the interaction. Panic flashed in her eyes. She yanked the girl's arm with brutal force, pulling her through the doorway and into the chilly air of the parking lot. "Let's go." "Now," she snarled. Sticks straightened up, the forgotten napkin still in his hand. He walked out the door behind them, letting it swing shut with a soft whoosh. The afternoon sun felt weak, the air thin. The parking lot was mostly empty now, just his bike, their car, and a lone pickup truck at the far end. Their car was an old, beat-up sedan, a faded blue with a spiderweb crack in the windshield and a dented rear bumper. It was anonymous, forgettable, the perfect vehicle for disappearing. The woman was fumbling with her keys, her hand shaking so badly she could barely fit the key into the lock. She kept glancing over her shoulder at him, her face a mask of fear and fury. Sticks didn't run. He didn't shout. He just walked toward them, his pace steady and relentless. He pulled out his phone. With his thumb, he hit a speed dial number. It was for Road Hogg, the president of the Iron Sentinels. The woman finally got the door open and shoved the little girl into the passenger seat. She ran around to the driver's side, her eyes never leaving Sticks. "Stay away from us," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "We haven't done anything." Sticks stopped about 10 feet from her car, creating a non-threatening distance that was still close enough to be a barrier. He put the phone to his ear. Road Hogg answered on the first ring. "Sticks. What's up?" "I need eyes and I need a call to state police," Sticks said, his voice calm and level, never breaking eye contact with the woman. "I'm at the Silver Fork Diner, Highway 26. I have a possible child abduction in progress." He calmly recited the make, model, and license plate number of the blue sedan. Subject is a female, late 30s. Victim is a female child, approximately 7 years old. They're about to run. The woman's face went white. She scrambled into the car, slammed the door, and cranked the engine. It coughed and sputtered to life. With a squeal of tires on gravel, she threw the car into reverse, swinging it around violently. She floored the accelerator, and the sedan shot out of the parking lot, heading east on the highway. "They're on the move," Sticks said into the phone. "Heading east on 26. I'm in pursuit." "We're on it," Road Hogg's voice came back, solid as granite. "The brothers are 10 minutes out from your location. We'll set up a rolling roadblock ahead. Cops are notified. Be safe, brother. Keep the kid in your sights." Sticks hung up. He swung his leg over his Harley, the leather of the seat creaking. He thumbed the ignition, and the V-twin engine roared to life, a deep, guttural sound that vibrated through his entire body. It was the sound of purpose. The sound of impending justice. He pulled on his helmet and gloves, his movements economical and practiced. He took one last look at the diner, where Darlene the waitress was now standing in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, watching the scene unfold. He gave her a short, sharp nod, a silent promise that he would see this through. Then, he twisted the throttle, and the big machine surged forward. The chase was on. He didn't ride recklessly. He wasn't trying to be a movie hero. His goal was not to stop the car himself, but to keep it in sight, to be a persistent, unshakable shadow. He was the shepherd, and his flock of one was in that blue sedan. He maintained a steady quarter-mile distance, enough to be non-threatening but close enough that he wouldn't lose them if they tried to turn off onto a side road. The highway unspooled before them, a ribbon of grey asphalt cutting through the dense, dark green of the forest. The trees were a blur on his periphery. All his focus was on that blue car. He could see the little girl's silhouette in the passenger window, a small shape against the passing world. He sent a silent message to her, "Hold on. Help is coming." He was a hunter, and this was his element. The wind rushed past his helmet, the engine was a steady roar beneath him, and his mind was clear and sharp. He felt every vibration of the road, every shift in the wind. He was one with the machine, a modern-day knight on his iron steed. He thought about the crackers, hidden in her coat. A small act of defiance. A small beacon of hope that she had refused to let be extinguished. He was riding for that hope. Minutes stretched into an eternity. He kept his phone connected to his helmet's comm system, giving quiet updates to Road Hog. Still heading east. Mile marker 82. No change in speed. Then, up ahead, he saw it. The flash of red and blue lights against the dark trees. The state police had been fast. They had set up a roadblock, 2 cruisers parked diagonally across the highway, creating a funnel that the sedan could not avoid. The driver of the blue car saw it too. The brake lights flashed bright red. The car swerved erratically as the woman panicked, looking for an escape that didn't exist. For a terrifying moment, Styx thought she might try to ram the roadblock or swerve into the ditch. But then, she seemed to lose her nerve. The car slowed, weaving slightly, before finally pulling over onto the gravel shoulder, about 100 yards from the police cars. Styx slowed his bike, pulling over a safe distance behind the sedan. He cut the engine, and the sudden silence was deafening, broken only by the chirping of birds in the trees. He stayed on his bike, a silent sentinel, as 2 officers emerged from their cruisers, weapons drawn but held in a low, ready position. They approached the car cautiously, one on the driver's side, one on the passenger's. He watched as the driver's side door was opened. The woman was pulled out, shouting and resisting, her voice a shrill, ugly sound in the quiet forest. She was quickly handcuffed and placed in the back of one of the patrol cars. Then, the other officer opened the passenger door. He knelt, speaking softly. A moment later, the little girl emerged, blinking in the sunlight. She was clutching something in her hand. The officer gently led her away from the car, toward the second police cruiser. As she walked, a few of the stolen cracker packets fell from her coat pocket, scattering on the gravel like forgotten clues. It was over. A third police car pulled up, and a senior officer, a sergeant with graying hair and a calm demeanor, got out and walked over to Styx. He looked at the bike, the leather vest, the patch, and his expression was neutral, professional. "You the one who called this in?" the sergeant asked. "I am," Styx replied, pulling off his helmet. "Mind telling me what you saw?" Styx recounted the story, keeping it simple and factual. The fear in the girl's eyes. The way the woman treated her. And the crackers. He explained the significance of the crackers, the secret hoarding that signaled deep-seated fear and neglect. The sergeant listened patiently, his eyes never leaving Styx's face. When he was finished, the sergeant nodded slowly. "Your instincts were spot on," he said, his voice holding a new note of respect. "We just got confirmation. The car was stolen 2 days ago. The woman is wanted for kidnapping. Her name is Sharon Gable. The little girl is Lily Anderson. She was taken from a park in Idaho 3 days ago. Her parents have been out of their minds. He paused, looking back toward the girl, who was now sitting in the front seat of a warm patrol car, wrapped in a thick blanket. You saved her life today. There's no doubt about it. Sticks just nodded, the words of praise feeling foreign and unnecessary. He hadn't done it for thanks. He had done it because it was the right thing to do. She asked to see you, the sergeant said. If you're willing. Of course. He walked over to the cruiser. The officer in the driver's seat gave him a nod and stepped out to give them privacy. Lily was huddled under the blanket, looking impossibly small in the big seat. She was holding a cup of hot chocolate in her small hands. She looked up at him as he approached, her brown eyes no longer filled with terror but with a dawning sense of wonder and relief. He knelt beside the open door, bringing himself down to her level again. He wasn't a scary biker anymore. He was just the man who had seen her. Hi, he said softly. Hi, she whispered back. Her voice was still tiny, but it was clear. She held out her hand. In her palm was one of the cracker packets she had managed to save. It was slightly crumpled, but intact. This is for you, she said. For being my friend. Sticks felt a lump form in his throat. He carefully took the small offering, his calloused, scarred fingers gentle as they closed around the packet. It was the most valuable thing she had to give, her treasure, her hope for survival. And she was giving it to him. Thank you, Lily, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I'll keep it safe. She gave him a small, watery smile. And then she said the words that would be etched into his soul forever. Thank you, she said, her voice gaining a little strength. Thank you for seeing me. He stayed there until her parents arrived. He watched from a distance as they ran to the police car, their faces a mess of tears and disbelief and overwhelming joy. He watched them wrap their daughter in their arms, a family made whole again by a stranger's attention to detail. He saw Lily point to him, to the big man with the motorcycle, and saw her father look over, his eyes filled with a gratitude so profound it needed no words. Sticks gave a final nod, put the cracker packet safely in his vest pocket, and walked back to his bike. His work was done. As he rode away, the sound of the Harley's engine felt different. It no longer sounded like thunder. It sounded like a lullaby. 1 year later, the clubhouse of the Iron Sentinels was a different place. The usual scent of leather, beer, and motor oil was mingled with the aroma of barbecue from a massive grill out back. It was the first annual Lily's Ride, a charity event the club had organized. They had partnered with the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and hundreds of bikers from all over the state had shown up to raise money and awareness. Sticks stood near the edge of the crowd, watching. He wasn't one for speeches or the spotlight. He preferred the periphery. In his locker, taped to the inside of the metal door, was a drawing. It was done in crayon on construction paper. It depicted a huge, muscular biker with a black vest holding the hand of a tiny girl with brown hair. The biker was smiling. It was the prize of his collection, more valuable than any trophy or medal. He and Lily's family had stayed in touch. He got texts from her parents with updates. Lily was in therapy and doing well. She was laughing again. She had joined the soccer team. For Christmas, they had sent him a card. Inside was a photo of a beaming, healthy 7-year-old girl, standing proudly in front of a Christmas tree, her arms around a new puppy. The missing piece of her childhood, the part stolen by fear, was slowly being filled back in with love and safety. He felt a tap on his arm. It was Lily herself. She was there with her parents, the guests of honor. She looked vibrant and happy, a world away from the pale, silent ghost he had met in the diner. Hi, Sticks, she said, her voice bright and confident. Hey there, kiddo, he smiled, crouching down to her level. Having a good time? She nodded enthusiastically. We raised a lot of money to help other kids. She looked at him, her expression turning serious. At school, I helped make a new rule. It's called the Cracker Code. If a kid is scared and can't talk, they can ask a grown-up for crackers. It's a secret signal, to let them know you need help. Sticks felt that lump in his throat again. This little girl, who had endured so much, was now using her experience to protect others. She was turning her trauma into a shield for the vulnerable. The ripple effect of that day in the diner was spreading further than he could ever have imagined. He reached into his vest pocket, the one right over his heart. He pulled out the small, crumpled packet of saltines she had given him a year ago. He had carried it with him every single day. "I still have it," he said softly. "Kept it safe, just like I promised." Lily's eyes welled up with tears, but they were happy tears. She threw her arms around his thick neck, hugging him with all her might. "You're my hero, Sticks," she whispered into the leather of his vest. He hugged her back gently, his big arms enveloping her. He looked over her head at her parents, who were watching with tears in their own eyes. He knew then that his life, with all its hard edges and quiet solitude, had found a new, profound purpose. It wasn't about the battles he had fought in the past, but about the ones he could still fight right here, right now. It was about seeing the unseen, hearing the unspoken, and having the courage to act. Later that evening, long after the crowds had gone home and the clubhouse was quiet again, Sticks sat alone, looking at the drawing on his locker. He thought about the infinite number of moments that make up a life, and how most of them pass by unnoticed. But every now and then, a single moment arrives that holds the weight of a lifetime. A quiet girl in a diner. A secret stash of crackers. A silent plea for help. He knew that true strength wasn't in the patches on your vest or the roar of your engine. It was in the quiet, steady attention you paid to the world, and in the simple, unwavering decision to step in when you see something wrong. It was about seeing the lilies of the world and telling them, without a single word, that they were not invisible. Not anymore.